But the other thing is that if you look at the sky and look for all the G stars, half of them are in binaries. And a binary is basically, there are two stars that are orbiting each other. And now if you're a measly little planet trying to make it in this world, those two stars, their tug-of-war is going to rip you apart. And so a lot of times those planets that are in binary systems will risk being ejected actually out of the system. So that really of that 7%, only half really are reliable. So about in all, 3.5, 4% of the stars are going to be amenable to a true sun-like condition. But you may say, well, okay, fine. What about all that 80% that is the red dwarf? What about those? Well, those, by the time you get that close to a star, it turns out a new effect takes place. The gravitational pull of the star on the planet takes the spherical planet and turns it into a slight jelly bean. Then the force, the gravitational force on the near side and the far side are different. And the planet, which is spinning, starts spinning slower. It turns out it works out that when that happens, it will slow down the spin. That will continue to slow down the spin until the spin rate of the planet matches its orbital period. At that moment, the planet is what is called tidally locked to the star. One side is always facing the star and can't move away. Okay, our moon is tidally locked to the Earth. That's why we always see the same side of the moon. It goes with the 6th power of the distance. So it's very strong effect. So with these M dwarfs, these red stars that are the most abundant, where you would be for the habitable zone is where you would actually have tidal locking. In which case, one side, the heat is constant and boils off all the liquid, water, and it all snows on the backside. You may have a terminator, the sunset-sunrise terminator, where there may be some liquid water, but that is nothing resembling a habitable Earth. There are newer work, this is only a few months old, by Hall et al., that says that actually that habitable zone has another constraint, and it's photosynthesis. And I keep saying photovoltaics, so if I do, please forgive me right now. There is, from a standpoint of how much energy you need to be receiving, there is a zone in which optimally a potential photosynthesizing process needs to have you be. But at the same time, you want to have liquid water. Now the intersection of the two mean that if you want both liquid water and photosynthesis, that you get that dark green little sliver. And that is now called the photosynthetic habitable zone, and it's a more constrained habitable zone. So now what we're doing is going over, talking about the constraints on life, one after another, okay? And that's, the next constraint is plate tectonics. Now, plate tectonics give us, come along with earthquakes and things we don't like, but plate tectonics also circulate the minerals on the Earth for life. They regulate carbon dioxide, which is a greenhouse gas, and help regulate the climate. The plate tectonics ends up being very important for life. But it turns out theoretical work has shown that plate tectonics appears to be hard to produce. So in the models where they try to reproduce sort of a formation of a planet, they find that this business of subduction, where one layer goes under another, doesn't seem to quite happen, and that the densities aren't right. It's almost, they said, like you take an inner tube and you're trying to force it under the water, and just the moment you let go, thing pops up. So these subducted layers don't stay down in the models. It is not quite clear what it takes to make this happen. Obviously, it happened here, but doesn't seem to be coming very easily. So that's plate tectonics. Another one, interestingly, is our moon. We have an anomalously large moon, and it serves to stabilize the axial tilt of the Earth. Now, the axial tilt of the Earth, what is that? Well, the Earth is spinning, but it's not spinning relative to the plane in which it's orbiting around the sun. It's not spinning kind of perpendicularly. It's got kind of an angle. And at that angle, that's why half the year, a quarter of the year it's summer, and a quarter of the year it's winter. We get the seasons because of that tilt, because the northern hemisphere gets a time where it is seeing sun directly. Now, the axial tilt exists on other planets. The problem is it exists too much. On Mars, the axial tilt varies by as much as 80 degrees. And so it just wreaks havoc on temperatures because there's no stable axial tilt. The moon stabilizes it. It stays within a few degrees of 23-ish degrees. And so that the moon serves the Earth in protecting the climate of the Earth. Similarly, we have the outer planets, interestingly, serving the Earth. Our solar system is like a clockwork of very well-behaved, circularly orbiting planets around the common star. It is not always so, and in fact, as we will see, this is very unusual to have this situation. An orbit doesn't have to be circular. In fact, the normal orbit will be some degree of elliptical. It will have, and that ellipticalness, there's a mathematical word that some of you in geometry might have heard. It's called eccentricity. So the eccentricity, when it's 1, that means you're so elliptical, you look like a line. And when it's 0, it means you're a perfect circle, okay? And so all of our planets have an eccentricity down around 0.05-ish. Very circular, very circular. What does this mean? This means, think of a planet like Jupiter, hundreds of times the mass of the Earth. Heavy planet that absorbs to itself all the junk of the solar system, the comets and the asteroids, the things whose impact on this Earth would be devastating. And it absorbs it to itself, and it's like a cosmic vacuum cleaner, just cleaning everything up, while politely staying at its 5 astronomical unit radius orbit, not moving near us. So it's out there protecting without coming around to be dangerous. This actually turns out to be unusual. The other thing is, of course, you need no oxygen. But what if you had only oxygen? A spark and the planet goes up, So we have oxygen, nitrogen, 4 parts nitrogen, and that has many benefits, but it certainly has that benefit. We talked about water. You need water for the carbon chemistry to work. But what if you had just massive amounts of water? What if it was just oceans? There was no hills, no mountains, nothing. Well, at that point, you have a problem because you need the radiation from the sun. You need the solar radiation. You need the light and the water. And you need materials to work with. And in the areas where land comes to near water and the shallow water, you get all these conditions. You get light, you get water, you get heat, and you get the minerals. And so it's very conducive to life to have those conditions. And so you need to have the right amount of water, not every amount of water. The next thing you need is a protective shield, because the universe is a dangerous place. There are cosmic rays that will radiate you to smithereens over a long period of time.